I'm going to teach you felting. Felting is a very ancient craft. Well, we all know about felt boots that were made millions of years ago, which people used to wear, probably very ancient people, and they kept them warm. We all know about those traditional burki of the wise elders who typically sit in the majestic mountains, and they habitually wear thick felt coats. Why? Because felt, or sheepskin, is such an amazing material. It keeps you warm in the cold and cool in the heat. So you can wear this burqa all year round and you'll always feel comfortable in it. That's right. But of course, you and I won't be making felt boots or burqas.
Or playing the fool.
We'll be felting delicate feminine things together. We'll be making skirts, dresses, and things we can wear and enjoy life in. So, where does felting actually begin? I'll be telling you about this based on how I started and the journey I went through to reach the level of mastery I have today. I made mistakes. I experimented. For a year, I started and learned on my own through the internet from some very fragmented articles, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. So that you don't make the same mistakes when you start working, I'm going to tell you now what you need to do to begin felting. Well, in general, felting, basically, I always compare it to making borscht. Before you cook something to eat, you need to know what ingredients to put in. You can use good potatoes or bad ones, good cabbage or bad cabbage. You'll still end up with borscht, but depending on what you put in, it will either turn out really tasty or not so much. But in any case, you'll get something. So we'll try to make sure that ours turns out delicious right from the start. That's it. When I was just starting out with felting, I bought all kinds of wool, grabbing whatever I could find in stores. I know a lot of girls who are just about to start felting. And as soon as they do, their inner hoarder kicks in. They see something and start grabbing everything, just scooping it all up. And the wool they get isn't always the quality they actually need. I got my experience and my share of bumps and bruises using Pekorskaya and Semenovskaya wool. And I realized that this wool is good for felting dry items like little toys, but it's absolutely unsuitable for dresses, blouses, or scarves. It's not very pliable and it doesn't felt well. Of course you can work with it, but you'll just end up struggling. And what we want is to work, not to suffer. That's why I started working with wool that we all know. Merino wool is produced by Italian and German manufacturers. It's of very high quality, it's soft, it's pliable, and it comes in a million shades that you can use as they are to make your item. And you don't have to struggle, you don't have to dye it unless that's part of your creative vision for your piece. That's it. So initially we have, again, wool is sold in several forms. It can be carded wool. This is carded wool batting. Carded wool batting is good. It's already somewhat processed. It's semi-felted wool, it's not fully felted, but partially processed wool. So it's very convenient to work with, especially if we're making things that don't need to be fitted to the body. For example, these could be slippers, bags, or maybe even some hats or felt boots. It could even be a dress, but say a loose-fitting dress where you don't need to shape it, fit it to the figure, or achieve a perfect fit. That's it. And later on I'll explain this to you in more detail, and you'll understand why carded wool doesn't work for our items. But besides all that, we also have wool that has been felted into a pre-felt state. This is called prefelt. It's already a kind of fabric that you can use if you're making scarves or if you're making skirts, either straight or wraparound. They're just perfect for that.
So this is almost a finished piece already.
It's almost finished. But what's the problem with it? With this fabric, of course, if you haven't yet developed a steady hand and you don't know how to lay out the wool properly and do the layout, everything here has already been done for you, it's ready. But again, it won't be very convenient for you to make a fitted dress with this. And there's also a difference in price. So either you lay out the wool yourself, or you buy prefelt, but you pay more. You spend less time on the layout, but you spend more money on materials. That's the first thing. Secondly, there are very few colors in prefelt. It's not as widely used in clothing production, so you'll have some limitations here. But what's good about prefelt? Again, for example, I use it when I make silk scarves. I can cut anything I want out of prefelt squares, hot sand lay them out on the silk in neat strips, and I end up with a scarf with little windows of wool and silk and neat geometric shapes. It's hard to do this with wool like this. Well, it's possible, but not very easy. This is an example of what you can make using prefelt. You can take a piece of silk fabric and lay the strips you cut from prefelt onto it, and you'll end up with a wonderful scarf like this. You can use squares or you can use circles. You'll always get a good result and a beautiful piece. Again, prefelt comes in white, and we can always use it with white silk and then dye it any color we want. Prefelt is also great for making openwork fabrics, like in this dress. This dress was made using prefelt. There's a kind of sandwich technique used there. But it's really prefelt that allows you to make these airy summer pieces that are practically weightless. And honestly, I can't think of a lighter material for summer than a dress made of wool and silk.
A sandwich even?
A sandwich? A sandwich is when we take 2 layers of silk and put a very thin layer of wool in between them. That's how the silk bonds together. Because of this, we get a single felted fabric, and thanks to this, we use wool, which gives us a thermos effect. So even in 45-degree heat, our body stays at 36.6 because the felt keeps us in that comfortable temperature range.
I got really inspired and realized that as a beginner felter it would be easier for me to work with prefelt. Just like how you made the back of the sundress.
Yes, prefelt is a wonderful and excellent material. But if you want to make a dress the way I made the back of the sundress, you need to understand that it has to be very lacy. That's it. In order for it to be lacy, it will consist of mania, huge number of diamonds or squares or circles, which you'll use to lay out your fabric. So you take the prefelt, cut out 135,000 little squares from it, and then lay out your entire pattern with these squares. But before that, you still need to make a little sandwich out of 2 layers of silk, with these squares placed in between. Then you'll need to run them all through the sewing machine and then felt them into a fabric. You'll end up with a dress. Of course, this dress will be very light, flexible, and extremely comfortable to wear. But I think that for a beginner, prefelt is good to work with, though you still need to put in quite a bit of effort to get a good result and a beautiful piece. And now we've come to wool roving. This is mainly what I work with. This is Italian wool. As I already mentioned, it comes in many colors. It has quite a large palette, and this wool is difficult to lay out at first. But once you get the hang of it, everything turns out great. So with this wool, we pull out very thin tufts like this, and using our hands, we lay them out onto the wool. This wool is the best choice for making clothing. Why? Because the direction in which we lay out our wool fibers determines the direction in which the wool will shrink. And we also have these truly wonderful and incredibly versatile helpers that assist us in creating beautifully glossy textures and exquisitely shimmering textures. They also give a distinctive and highly realistic snakeskin effect. Yes, these are decorative fibers. There are a lot of them. I haven't even tried working with all of them. For example, there's silk, there's mulberry silk, which is brighter, and there's tussa silk.
Is this silk here?
Yes, this is silk. This is exactly the silk fiber that we use to decorate our items. It's specifically with silk fiber that we can lay out our piece, and it will acquire a very rich, beautiful texture.
Is it like on that purple dress?
On the purple dress, we used silk. And these are silk fibers. That's a little different. What's good about silk fibers? So let's say we take two types of wool and start working. Let's take pink and burgundy. If you're using two types of wool, try to always have the darker color on the bottom and lay the lighter one on top as the second layer, because the dark color will come through to the surface and give depth. But if we have a light color on the bottom and a dark one on top, the light color will come through to the surface and create a grayish effect. Why would we want that? It doesn't look good. So when working with two colors, always put the darker shade on the bottom. That's it. And again, when we use two types of wool, the fibers intertwine and blend, creating a sort of third color. So it won't be exactly the same as what we originally laid down. But if we put fiber on top of our little sandwich, it doesn't blend with the wool, it just gives a beautiful glossy shine and a lovely texture. If we had put wool of this color here, the pink would most likely have completely absorbed it, and we would have only faint hints of it. You can use any fibers on any woolen items, any kind of fiber. And the fibers will stay exactly the color you put them down as. They just give you a beautiful textured pattern. You can experiment with this and have a rough idea of what your final result will look like. Then we also have some very interesting and versatile natural fibers, specifically called hemp, nettle and flax, which are all quite sustainable.
Wow.
They're all natural too, but in terms of their overall texture, you see, if our silk is exceptionally soft and wonderfully pliable, then all these other natural fibers are noticeably stiffer, but they create a much more distinctively textured visual and tactile effect when we carefully use them. It's a deeper wave, more pronounced. Before you start making an item, you can always think about what kind of decorative option you want to use in it. Besides all that, we also have viscose. Viscose is sometimes used so that you don't have to put silk on the inside of the item. I understand that this probably doesn't mean much to you right now.
Pretty much nothing.
But during our master class, you'll see that we can use viscose as a lining material. We can use viscose in multi-layer layout as a material that first allows our item to be more flexible. We can use viscose on top of the wool. In that case, the entire fabric will have either a glossy or matte sheen, depending on the type of viscose you choose. Because, for example, this viscose, by the way, this is Russian viscosides, very good. I like it. It has a wonderful matte sheen. And Israel, I've worked with both German and Russian viscose. I like them both. They create a great effect, resulting in a glossy, beautiful and even fabric. So why do we put viscose on top, for example, and not Marlboro silk? Because, well, I don't remember exactly, but for instance, before all these price hikes and crises, you could buy 100 grams of viscose for, I think, 40, 60 or 80. Well, let's say about $5. But silk will cost you for 100 grams, well, about $105. So silk is very expensive, and covering the entire surface of the product with silk would be quite costly for you. Well, at least in the early stages, I recommend you use slightly cheaper materials until you get the hang of it, because it's always a shame to throw away something expensive. And you need something to practice on.
Did you throw away a lot?
No, I didn't throw anything away. I have friends who used to get my scarves. Well, let me put it this way. Before I started working with fine wool products, I spent a year working with carded wool. I mostly made slippers, felt boots and flowers And I really honed my skills on those and became comfortable working with them. Before I started working with the silk, I ruined one scarf because I tried to make it myself. I started making it based on the scattered information I found online, and nothing worked out. Well, I ended up with a scarf full of holes. I'll tell you what to do to avoid those holes, and I'll explain why they happen. So I realized either I would spend a year practicing wasting material and learning in a haphazard way, or I could spend money on a master class and gain this knowledge from a professional who already knows how to work with this material. That's it. And we also have this little lifesavers wool fibers, which we can also use when we're laying out decorative elements on our pieces. We can use any kind of wool, like this one, for example, or just regular basically any woolen yarn gives us the opportunity to create geometric shapes, waves, really anything we want. So on the already laid out piece, we place these wool fibers and they give us additional texture. In other words, there are so many decorative options you can use in felt, which will embellish your item and make it unique, because you'll never be able to make exactly the same thing twice as you did the first time. Your hand won't move the same way, the wool won't be laid the same, your wool fibers will fall differently. It will always be a new piece. So, saying that felt is always exclusive is true. It's always new and always has a different mood. There's something else I want to tell you about wool. For example, I have students who come to me, they come and say, oh, we have so much wool, we've bought everything. And they say, we have wool in different colors. They buy these days pre-packaged wool in little bags, like 50 grams, 20 grams each. It's cut at the ends like this and sorted into little bags by color. That's exactly what you can throw away right away.
Like a craft kit.
Yes, exactly those craft kits. Because to do felting, you need to have an uneven end like this, because it's convenient to grab the wool like this thinly by the tip. And then we lay it out. If you have a cut end like this, you'll need to take it and bring it to this state before you can start working with it. That's it. And mostly, of course, these craft kits. First of all, you can never guess how much wool you'll need. At first, you need to take a little more wool. Because usually when your hand isn't steady yet and you haven't mastered the layout, you might end up using 200 or 300 grams of wool just for a sweater or a child's dress. For example, I might use about 200 grams of wool for a large dress. There are craftswomen who only need 50 to 100 grams of wool for a dress. That is, they work a bit in different techniques. So if you plan to felt yourself a skirt or some other large item, always take 100 grams more wool than you think you'll need. It's better to later use the leftover wool to make a scarf than to end up halfway through your layout, calling all your friends and acquaintances saying, please, give me some, I have nothing to finish with. I'll also tell you later what to do when you run out of wool and still need to keep felting your project. So that's that. And one more thing I want to mention, it's very important to know what fineness your wool is. For example, wool can be 30 microns, 26 microns, or 18 microns. For example, this wool here is 18, 19, 21, or 26 microns. And there is also ultrafine wool, which can be 16 or even 15 microns. The lower the micron count, the finer and more pliable the fiber is. We can't, for example, take 16 micron wool and by laying it out in 5 or even 10 layers, make a coat. You could make one, but it wouldn't be as good. So we use certain micron counts for warm items and different micron counts for lighter items. Starting from 21 microns, we can already felt vests, some coats, and outerwear. Everything that's 15, 16, 18 microns, or around 19, we can easily use that for scarves, hats, well, for hats, and if it's a beret, that's a bit questionable. But for simple, lightweight hats, that's no problem at all. And for dresses, blouses, and skirts, specifically wool, that's 16 and 18 microns.
So it's only sheep, right? No other kind of animal at all.
Well, some girls have tried felting with dog hair, with cat hair. This kind of wool itself doesn't felt, it's specifically sheep's wool that does. Why is that? Because its fiber structure is similar to hair. What makes the felting process happen? When the wool gets wet, its scales open up, just like human hair, just like that. And when we actually start felting it, these scales do this. And gradually, they bond together so tightly that it forms a fabric. And that's how felt is made. It's specifically sheep's wool that has these properties. Other types of wool don't have this.
I see.
After you've decided on your project, you naturally have the question, what do you do with it next? So, where is that pot in which you'll be cooking your borscht? And that pot also comes in many different types. Well, first of all, I never work without electrical appliances that are used to make felter's life easier. I use, oh, that's scary, vibrating sanders. Here they are. Actually, at first I had this one. It's called Zenith. It's very cheap. Well, I don't know, it costs $10 or $20, I'm not sure. And it doesn't have a very, very deep vibration. Let's put it that way. I'll explain why a bit later. And this one here is a Russian-made sander. There are Makita vibrating sanders. I think they're Czech or German, I don't remember, but they're very expensive. And this one is a Makita Analog Titan. This machine has a really good, strong vibration, and I like it for working with felt. This sander's vibration isn't very deep. You could say that this machine slightly greases the felt, so it doesn't felt together very well. You can use it to stack the piece during the process. But with this machine, you can set it down and you get a fabric that won't fall apart and that you can continue working with. I understand right now all of this probably makes no sense to you at all. If you've never tried, yes, never even held wool in your hands, never done felting, but you just need to know that there are machines with different levels of precision. They come in different price ranges and qualities, and depending on which one you choose, your work will either be easier or more difficult. So it's like the expenses for materials that you use in your work. Why two? And also, is it possible to get by with just one? Yes, you can. Well, I bought this one at the very beginning. It was cheap. I got it because I didn't know yet that I would actually need a more expensive one. And when you buy a machine, try to make sure it doesn't have a suction effect. You need to check this nozzle here. If it sucks in air like a vacuum cleaner, then your water will get cooled in here the same way. In general, we actually do all the felting using hot water and soap. And if water gets sucked in here, you could end up with a short circuit. So you absolutely have to wrap the machine with something like a bag or plastic wrap to protect it and prevent a short circuit. This machine doesn't have a nozzle like that. It's suitable for working with aggressive environments. It doesn't suck anything in, and it's safer for felting. But again, you can always cover this part with some plastic wrap, and when you're working with it, you'll have some extra protection. That's as far as the machines are concerned. But there's still so much to do before you even get to the machine. Before using the machine, you'll need to lay out the wool. You can't make a dress without a machine. There are girls who work without a machine, but if you don't use one, you'll have to rub the wool for much longer. It's a longer process, and the felt turns out a bit different. Well, it's very flexible, very good. I work with a machine is more convenient for me, and I like it that way. But when you start working with felt, you'll figure out for yourself which method suits you best. Just like every homemaker has her own version of the same recipe, here too you'll think about what you can substitute for one thing or another. There's also something else that's not absolutely necessary, but still a desirable component to work with if you want to make felted fabric. This here is not French olive soap. And again, the soap is expensive, but you can find it in almost all specialized online felting stores. It creates the right kind of lather, it doesn't foam too much, and it helps the wool fibers bond together and turn into felt. Of course, you can use regular household soap. That is, an alkaline environment that allows the wool to felt. But with household soap, your hands will just get raw. It's very painful and frankly unpleasant. That's why I recommend olive soap. Well, you can use it, some girls even felt with fairy dish soap from time to time. Again, in every city. With what? With dishwashing liquid? Ah, I see. Again, as experience shows, I found out that in different cities the water hardness varies. If the water in your area is hard, regular soap will be enough for you. It might not even have to be olive soap. You can choose another kind that works for you. If the water in your city is soft, then you need to make it more aggressive, well, harder. And for that, of course, more aggressive cleaning agents are suitable. And Fairy helps speed up the final felting process because thanks to its properties, it really makes the felting process much faster and more convenient. That's it. So you'll need to consider what kind of water you have in your city and what is most convenient for you to work with. We also definitely need a mesh like this. We use this mesh to rub the wool when we lay it out. So we cover our wool layout with this mesh, pour soapy water over it, and start the rubbing process. I also recommend buying the right kind of mesh from an online store because when I first started, following the advice of experienced crafters, I used mosquito netting, some kind of tulle or organza. Isn't that tulle you're using? No, this is a special felting mesh. It's quite interesting. First of all, the weave is such that in one direction it's easy to soap, but in the other direction it's like going against the grain, not so easy. So this is the mesh that's specifically used for felting. You can buy it in online stores. That's it. What should you look for with this mesh? First of all, it really needs to be a mesh. Secondly, it shouldn't fell together or stick to the wool when we cover it. With other meshes, you might lift it up and everything comes up with it. But this mesh works very gently with our felt. It smooths well and comes off easily. The main thing is not to make the mistakes that some girls sometimes do. They lay out the wool for our project, then cover it with mesh, wet it with water, soap it up, and then take a machine and start buzzing over the mesh. But how should it be done? And then they can't separate the mesh from the piece because it gets stuck on. What you should do is rub it in, carefully remove the mesh, and then continue working. We'll see this when we start making our pieces and doing the layout. The materials we need for our work, I used to work on bubble wrap. It was convenient, it was wonderful. But this bubble wrap has one huge drawback. During the process, all those bubbles fill up with water and then the whole workspace ends up flooded. There's practically nowhere for the water to go, and drying this film isn't very convenient. At the end of your work, you either have to throw it away or hang it up somewhere. And when you're making a dress, for example, your layout or the surface you're working on needs to be, say, 2.5 meters by 1.5 meters, and the film is the same size. Now imagine if you live in a regular apartment, where in your home could you possibly dry that? Well, at the very least it's inconvenient. Then, in those little bubbles, the water takes a really long time to dry. And your neighbors might start wondering why you're always drying plastic sheeting on your balcony, what's going on with you. It's not a given that you want to explain all that to everyone. So yeah, that's why I started using, again, thanks to attending a masterclass by a wonderful craftswoman and learning from her experience. I work on something like this. It's a bath mat. A bath mat, yes. But this particular bath mat I have is small. I use it to make samples, which you absolutely need to do when you're working. And for making larger items, I have a big rug, about 2 by 1.5 meters, or maybe 2.5 by 1.5. And after I'm done working, I just roll it up like this, put it in the corner. It drains completely and it doesn't get in my way at all. And I don't have to keep buying a new one all the time, like with bubble wrap, which always ends up wearing out anyway. And what's also great about working with these kinds of bath mats, I take my table and then I cover it with a protective oilcloth. Subsequently, on top of that, I carefully place either a soft terry towel or a big old terry sheet or just a regular sheet. And then I cover it only with this bath mat. And as a result, when I wet items, I'm not going to do it right now, all the excess moisture passes through this mat and gets absorbed by the duvet cover, the sheet, or whatever else you've put underneath. And at the end of the work, I just roll this up and put it in the corner. The fabric that I have left, I just take it, throw it in the washing machine, rinse it and dry it. And I have almost minimal effort to set up my workspace for next time. It's easy to store, easy to dry, and it doesn't cause you any discomfort. So we've finished with the preparation. Now, I also want to tell you something important. Since we're going to be working with Nuno felting, and Nuno felting is a technique that uses natural silk and also uses non-fabric materials. Regular felt is simply products made from wool without silk. But Nuno felt is a product that we make using silk fabric. And a product made without silk fabric, what could that be? That really could be anything you like. Just the same dress, a skirt, a sweater. So you can make it using fabric, or you can make it without using fabric. That's it. No problem at all. It's simply whatever you prefer. The texture will be different, right? It will vary. The texture is different, the look is different, but it's much cheaper. Because silk is expensive. And without silk, the cost of making the item is a bit lower. Well, that's something you'll decide for yourself, what you want to put into your creation. So, as for silk, this truly exquisite and versatile material. Well, I personally work with it quite extensively, and it's highly probable that almost all the skilled artisans and craftspeople here within our specific geographical region also diligently work with these very same beautiful materials. And depending on which type of silk we choose, we'll get different effects. Silk comes in there as dyed silk. Mostly, of course, it's white. And if you want to make, say, a pink or brown dress, you need to dye the silk yourself or buy it already dyed, which is a bit more expensive. In approximately the color or color scheme that your piece will be. And how do you do it? I dye it myself. That's right. So there is Margilan open weave silk. Everyone knows about it. This silk is used either for the outer layer of the piece or for the lining. And this silk gives us, well, just a glossy texture on our product. It's very thin, very open weave. You see, it's really just like a web, like a spider web. That's right. But it will never give us these kinds of ruffles because it's not dense enough for that. That's right. But it will give us, well, here what's used is not the open weave Margilan silk, but just regular Margilan silk. So you can use it as a base for your piece. Then we have, did you dye this one? Yes, I dyed it. I dyed it for the piece we're going to make together. Here. Then we have Excelsior silk. Here. Here it comes with such brilliance, do you see? Yes, glossy. And here we have the silk. Right here, it is used, only it is used in different colors, do you see? Due to this, we get this kind of color gradation on our product. Did you also paint all this? Yes, here we used silk fabrics that were dyed in different colors, and then laid out on the dress. And that's what creates this transition. Here, this is specifically Excelsior. It gives this kind of shine and creates a beautiful, beautiful ruffle. We also have silk chiffon. Silk chiffon also gives us a beautiful flowing ruffle, but this particular ruffle won't be as shiny or reflective. Instead, it will present a much more subdued, elegant, matte finish, so to speak. Here, on this specific sample, we've meticulously used a delicate ruffle that has been expertly crafted from pure silk chiffon. It's a more muted, understated color, offering a sophisticated aesthetic. And here, for example, we have a ruffle made from Excelsior. Do you see the difference? Here it shines, and here it's just a regular matte silk, which still drapes well. This is silk chiffon. You can also use gauze as a base or lining for your pieces. Gauze is, of course, a very budget-friendly option. It reinforces your piece, gives it flexibility, and doesn't cost much. So you choose what you like best, and that's what you work with. I pretty much dye all the materials myself. And sometimes I can even make a piece entirely out of white silk or white wool and then dye the whole thing afterwards. I don't use expensive dyes. Well, why is that? Because, for example, what we have available for sale are very small packets. And a single color costs about $10 or $15 per packet. But I only need the tiniest bit of it. So it just doesn't make sense for me to buy these expensive dyes in such large quantities because I always want to make something different, in a different color. That's it. But in our city, for example, there are some really great paints available. There are some from Lviv, and there are also similar dyes from St. Petersburg. These are aniline dyes meant for home use. One of these packets is enough for you to dye, well, at least 10 meters of silk. Actually, I just cut off a little corner and used it several times. And the color palette here is really big, just huge. And I can mix them, so every time I get something new and interesting. So I cut off a corner on this side, and here I have a little piece of paper with a color tester stuck on. After that, I just mix everything however I want. So they're pretty easy to work with, they give a good lasting color, and you don't have to pay more. In what cases do you dye the fabric first, and in what cases do you dye the finished product? If I know that I'm using, for example, a rich burgundy wool fabric for my dress, then I will definitely need a matching burgundy silk material to go along with it. So I take the silk and dye it before I start working. But if, for example, I end up not liking the result I got, let's say I finished the piece, but somehow the color scheme, maybe the silk and wool, didn't quite blend together as I expected. I was expecting one effect, but ended up with another. I can always take the finished item and dye it again, add more color and depth, and achieve exactly what I want. The exact image I have in mind. So all of this comes later based on your experience, your preferences, and how you envision the final result. Here, for example, we have silk chiffon dyed in a grayish color, which is also left over. There you go. It's also great to use all sorts of patterned silks. They're truly a treasure trove for you. You take the wool, lay it out, then place silk like this on top, for example, and you end up with a dress covered in roses. It creates a beautiful drape, shrinks a little, and gives a unique pattern. But when you look at this silk, you can already imagine what kind of pattern you'll have on your piece. It always looks very beautiful, and you end up with what seems like a warm woolen sweater or dress adorned with such gorgeous rich flowers or maybe some paisley patterns. So you get to choose whatever pattern you want, because usually the selection of designs and colors for winter clothes in stores is pretty limited, and they all look so dull and gray. That's it. But with this, you can make yourself a warm, beautiful item with a gorgeous pattern. That's it. When choosing if you want to make a piece entirely out of these silk scarves or silk fabric, It should have as loose a weave as possible. The more open the weave, like you can see me perfectly through it, the better. It should be thin. It should be made specifically from silk chiffon, or, well, it should be a plain weave and loose, so that the wool can easily pass through it, because otherwise you won't get such a flexible fabric and it will be quite difficult for you to felt it. That is, you will felt it, you will full it, but still it won't be quite what you would want or could achieve. You see, on this dress, on the blue wool, we have laid silk with a pattern. And as a result, we got a dress with a pattern. On the inside, this dress is lined with Magellan silk. This gives it flexibility. Because of this, it is more comfortable to wear. That's it, and it holds its shape well.